person wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance with board policy. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, and a request to speak form will be filled out. With that, I'm going to start off, and I don't know. It's certainly not a purview of this committee, but this is just a thought that I've had. I've had it now for a few months, and as I walked in the door today, I saw this downstairs. There were 2 of them.
Okay.
And I saw this, and I said, this makes a lot of sense. And if I'm in the water industry, I understand it.
Okay.
If I'm not, like a customer coming in, some of this I have no clue what it means. So my question is, are we passing by, and the same thing with Splash, the articles I've read, are we passing by these things when we do outreach? Different department, I understand. When we do outreach, are we passing it by, as was recommended by someone, 2 or 3 members of the public, read this and see what you think? Because we do things in here that are confusing to people, and they look at it and go, yeah, blah. Why waste the money putting this up if you don't understand it? In my opinion, wrong department, but I just saw it today. Where do your rates go? That's great. What costs are driving recent rate increases? That's terrible.
Okay.
What costs are driving rate increases? What costs are driving costs? I don't like the recent rate increases, the ones we're just socking it to you with, because it's always true. I don't know. Where does every dollar go? This is very good. This down here is so confusing, makes no sense at all. 88% of what you pay for water goes to the wholesale cost of water. That I understand.
Okay.
The next one. 26% wholesale increase in water costs due to the first year's delivery of desalinated water. Were the trucks more expensive that year? What was the first year? This year? Last year? Are we paying a loan, and how many years is this going to go on for?
So it was the first calendar year of receiving desal water, as I think, right, Tom? Is that
2016.
Yeah, it was 2016. That's what we're trying to indicate, that the purchase of the desal water drove up our costs a lot.
And I understand, and being on the board, I understand, and having more knowledge than the common person,
Yeah.
I understand. But the common person walking the door doesn't get that.
Yeah.
There's like, what does that mean? You didn't plan on having desal?
I would even go so far to say that, sorry to interrupt, that the common person doesn't even know what wholesale water is compared to retail water.
Yeah, that might be true. Yeah.
Because they don't get it. They don't know how it all works.
So I'm just saying, when I saw this, I said, I just need to bring this in and just go over it. Are we trying to deal with the public here, or are we satisfying our own egos?
Well, the intent was to be for the public, and we put this out as kind of a trial balloon, if you will, at the Water Academy, and you're going to see how the people that looked at it, how they reacted to it. If people started asking questions like that, what does that mean? Then that would help us tailor the message for things like between the pipes and future meetings and things like that. Because you're right, sometimes we're so comfortable with what it means that it's clear, but then somebody else reads it and it's not as clear. And we're hoping the Water Academy folks would help us clarify it for them.
But at the Water Academy, much like when we have a finance meeting with 6 items on the agenda, people are bombarded with, they're tuning most of it out,
Yeah.
picking whatever they came there to find out. That's what they're there to see. The rest of the stuff to them is all rhetoric. You know, it's I want to know this, and that's what they're there for. But I'm just saying, before we spend money and do things, and the Splash, another one, we have some common people read it,
Yeah.
and say, well, what does this mean? What is it? And if they say, what does it mean? That means a lot of your audience asked the same question, you know. But I think it's just incumbent upon ourselves to understand the people that we're dealing with don't understand water like a finance manager does, like a general manager does.
Right.
They don't understand it. So you have to break it down to make it easier to understand, in my opinion.
Yeah. No.
So, but I don't know what department that is that needs to review, but I think we need review. The last Splash was the same thing. There was stuff in them going, I wouldn't have a clue as to what this meant. You know, and the same with the 218. Other than the legal parts you have to do, our 218 was pretty good this time.
Right.
It's getting better as time goes on. But other than the legal parts you have to do, some of it is like, what does that mean? And that's why a lot of times when I ask questions at meetings, it's not because I'm doubting what it says, it's because, how do you break that down to explain it to junkie public?
Yeah. Okay.
Who gets the bill in the mail, looks at it and goes, I don't know what this means, my water went up.
Yeah.
That would mean nothing to me whatsoever. I just,
Yeah.
Just a personal opinion.
Okay. It's always a challenge, particularly when you have limited real estate. You want to do it in a small, concise thing, and some of these things take a very detailed explanation. Because if I wanted to fully explain that, it would probably be a paragraph and a half.
I agree. So you can't. So don't put it
Yeah.
up there.
Right.
You can't fully explain it. Don't put up what you can't fully explain. The first part, what costs drive water prices instead of increases and negative,
Yeah.
recent and negative. What costs, and show that pie chart. It's a great pie chart.
Yeah.
But it's the verbiage you put around it, and even where does every dollar go. That makes a lot of sense. That's a good chart.
Okay.
That shows, but I'm just saying, the wording is so that you really need to have people look at it, I think, that are not in the industry,
Yeah.
to get a good feel for what the general public is going to conceive it to be. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And why do we call it capital replacement? Is that because the infrastructure was already built in and we're replacing the capital that was used
Yes.
to put it in? Versus why don't we just call it infrastructure replacement? Because isn't that ultimately what we're going to be doing?
Yeah, we could call it that. I mean, it's technically the term.
More than infrastructure, yeah, it's any capital asset.
Yeah, and it's a dollar amount determination as to what makes it a capital asset.
But
Including
infrastructure
infrastructure.
makes more sense to John Q. Public
Yeah, I don't.
than capital. Capital is this building.
Even like my first few months on the board, like I probably didn't really understand. I know what capital is, I know what replacement is, but
Yeah.
I didn't understand how it all related to our system here. And
Right.
so,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah. So where was it? So sorry, I just saw this. I came in, so I had to bring it up.
All right.
Planning for future committee meetings, so getting onto this agenda. And another thing I'd like to do, it kind of disturbs me that, let's use SCADA. This is fictitious. We spent $2 million on a SCADA computers upgrade, blah, 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 blah. Well, at the end, what's the cost of recovery? What's the time of
the
recovery?
ROI.
What's the ROI? We don't see that ever. And it's like, I really want to know that. Is it worthwhile doing? Is it just to say we have the latest and greatest in technician, in technical things? Or, because let's face it, SCADA we have to upgrade every year, or every 2 years, you have to upgrade it. So there's an ongoing cost as well as the initial impact. And the question with SCADA in particular is, where's your cost savings in personnel? Because that's exactly what that is. And efficiency. You have a better efficiency because the computer will tell you if something's wrong right away.
Right.
Versus having a guy go out once a week and find something's wrong. It could be on the 7th day, and it's been wrong for 7 days. But I'd like to see the recovery. I think I brought it up at one meeting. It just came up.
So are you talking in the board report,
Yeah.
or in a committee setting?
And in a board report, I like to see it.
Okay.
I like to show that we're concerned about what we spend and what we expect to get back. There has to be one. If there isn't one, then why are we doing it? In my own business, when I had tanning beds, when I had to replace a tanning bed, I had to look at it and say, is it worth it? Am I doing that much business in the next, and I use 2 years.
Yeah.
And in water, you probably can use 5, but no longer, even though you're gonna be here forever. 5 years before you have to replace it, or another greater program comes out that you have to use it, or whatever the number happens to be. But what is that? I mean, why are we getting the latest and greatest if not to save money, or time, or efficiencies, or whatever it is? What's the offset?
Right.
Because all we see on there, and I've asked on a couple of occasions, is, we got this great new program. Well, that's great. And it costs $2 million. Well, that's great. Well, what's it saving us? Why are we spending this $2 million?
Yeah.
What goal are we getting to? I guess. So that's something I'd like to see, and especially from finance, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
So bring it back to finance.
So I guess my comment to that is, if we were embarking on something brand new, let's rewind the clock when we first went away from manual meter reading. That's a good example of we have people in trucks and they're driving around, they're stopping at every meter, and it costs a certain amount for labor and equipment and all that.
Mhm.
And then we decided to go into more of an automated meter reading. So you're really changing the way you're doing things. To me, that's the time that you do that type of analysis to say, here's what the program will cost, and here's how much you'll save or avoid in the future, because that's a savings too. We won't have to add people as we add meters, that type of thing. But once you've decided on a technology and are going in a way, if you're just replacing that technology, I don't know if you're asking to see that analysis too. For example, desktop PCs. it's understood that computers are a good thing to have. Nobody does an ROI to determine if you should have computers.
Right.
So when you go to replace your computers, again, I don't think you're asking for an ROI for something like that.
No.
But if
Or
we're gonna-
replacing pipes, or replacing trucks, no.
Right. Okay.
But systems, when they're being replaced, there's gotta be a reason to replace the system.
Well, if it's being replaced, we'll take SCADA. So SCADA is integrated into our very fabric of our organization. If we go to replace SCADA with something new, it's probably because the old one's not being supported anymore.
Right.
If we're doing something different than that, most of it's just a replacement. So to keep things kind of status quo, there's a cost. So
Right.
I'm struggling a little bit with whether you want to analyze those types of
No.
expenses.
No,
Or,
I mean,
okay.
it's like new trucks, you have to have them every so often.
Right.
But I would like to analyze, when we buy a new truck, what our useful life expectancy is of that truck.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that now. How many miles, how many years, I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but I've asked for it before in,
So they
Years ago.
have criteria over there in terms of age, mileage, frequency of repairs, how often is it in the shop, downtime, those types of things, and those are used as guidelines to when a vehicle needs to be replaced. So,
so is that a specific vehicle, or is it,
for different, I would say different classes of vehicles,
Right.
like a traditional passenger vehicle that we're just taking to meetings and things like that, like a pool vehicle
Right.
is one thing versus a heavy duty work truck, like
Right.
a valve turning truck, something like that.
Yeah.
Very different criteria. Some vehicles don't lend themselves well to miles because they have a power transfer, power takeoff unit that the engine's running, but it's not driving anywhere, but it's driving all the equipment. So
that's the big Vector truck?
yeah, things like that. So it may be parked for, not parked, but at one site for 4 hours, not moving at all, but the thing's running the whole time. That's wear and tear. Then you'd go on runtime of the engine.
Yeah, I don't wanna get down the weeds with it, but,
Right.
but an overview, or if we ask for it, we should have it, I mean, other than, it's time to replace it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why? Because it has 60,000, well, what does that mean? Does that mean it's dead? I keep my vehicles to 75, 80,000, some people keep them to 200,000.
Right.
What's the rationale, I guess?
Okay. Well, we could do a deeper analysis. We can explain our analysis better when we take the staff report forward or through the budgetary process when there's going to be vehicles to be
Okay,
replaced.
great. So that,
Okay.
that was the one thing I thought of that I'd like to know. I don't know if you thought of anything else other than the items on the agenda. Like I said, one day we came in and we had five or six. Well, I don't retain as much information as I should when we have 5 or 6 things that were, and then we didn't have anything for the next 2 meetings, and it's like, really? Well,
Yeah.
why didn't we pace this out a little bit? And I don't know if it was a time issue at the time. I don't.
Yeah, I don't remember all the specifics. I remember the meeting you were talking about that had quite a few.
Yeah, but it was so much in there. It wasn't time to ask a lot of questions on it.
Yeah.
And one had to do with the other, had to do with the other. A lot of it had to do with the other. Did you change your hairstyle too?
For today.
Just for the meeting.
Oh yeah, I know. You're
Not
really
for the
different.
Oh,
For Halloween.
Oh, for Halloween.
My
Yeah.
costume. Yeah, I didn't think it out all the way because I'm thinking, what the hell am I gonna do tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's not Halloween anymore.
Happy day after Halloween. So items that, in my opinion, what I'd like to see finance do, items that are coming up on the agenda to be done in enough time that the finance can get a lot of its answers. And this, I think we're the 2 most questioning people on the board, especially when it comes to finance. And it's not because of our lack of trust. In my case, I'm going to speak for me, it's not because of my lack of trust, it's because of my lack of knowledge. So I thirst for more knowledge and why is this A and why is this A, B, and why is this C. And some people might tell you there's a lack of trust and why do I have to deal with this? It's like, well, because I really need to know.
Yeah.
So I think the more that can come before finance, before it hits the board, it's not for us to do anything, it's still gonna go to the board. I mean, the board's gonna make a decision, but it's to give us the information, in my case, give me the information ahead of time to digest it. I mean, boards in the future are gonna be more questioning. I know some boards in the past never asked a single question. But that was boards of the past. Boards in the future are gonna be asking a lot of questions and to get a lot of answers just because they don't know.
Right.
So, anyhow, I'd like people to understand that when I ask a question, it's not, other than, are we allowed to carry motorcycles on trucks? Other than that, the question is because I want the information, because I don't know the information. It's not a gotcha question.
Okay.
Yeah. And for me, the only thing that really came to mind as I was kind of thinking about this leading up to the meeting is more of, as we go into 2018 and beyond, from a kind of a strategic standpoint, how can we collect and analyze more data that will help us be, at least either be more innovative and more efficient, or be able to consider options that could be more innovative or more efficient, and kind of in a way that we're just continuously looking to improve. And you guys know from prior budget discussions that we had, I look at this and what costs are driving rate increases, and my first mind is, well, what can we cut before we
Go to
drive rate increases? That's always going to be my first angle from that. So when we're looking at ways from a finance standpoint and we're analyzing data, how can we utilize whatever that is we're analyzing to do things more efficiently, more innovatively, and more ultimately more cost effectively? So I don't know what that looks like in the water world. I can tell you what that looks like in the business world, but I think that there's some things that we can take from private industry and private sector and implement, and it may make sense in kind of more of a government type environment. So
So you're talking more like data-driven analysis
Yeah.
and performance metrics and that type of stuff.
yeah, when I first got on the board, I talked a lot about creating some metrics, and Tom probably remembers. I thought that I know that we came up with some metrics that are still today in our board packet around, and I think Chris does for us, but it really wasn't the kind of metrics that I was looking for, and I kind of dropped it, but as a finance committee, maybe that's something that we can re-explore. So.
So at our managers meeting, which we'll have one tomorrow, we've been talking on a regular basis about dashboards and those
Yeah.
types of things.
Good.
And, James has been in touch with, I think it's VID, that is going through some kind of a process to develop a benchmark criteria. So we're kind of sharing the data that they have, and we'll see how that applies to our operation. Most of it should. They're very similar organization in many ways. So.
Yeah, I think if, and I'm assuming that all the different departments within our district are measuring what they do and kind of measuring their results in some way, shape, or form. But if we can maybe either have some visibility into how they're doing it now, or we come up with a consistent way of doing it across the entire district. And again, it's all about, how do we measure our results of what we're doing, and how do we know where we are today so we can maybe get better tomorrow? And maybe you guys all have that all in place, but I know when I mentioned it to General Manager Lamb when I first got on the board, it was either somewhat of a foreign concept, or it just wasn't something that he was really ready to engage the board with. I don't know which one it was, but it didn't really come to fruition. So
Okay.
that was.
Yeah, so we're looking at those
2014.
things, and some of it is just how do you, part of what you said in there, Director Sinello, is how do you communicate it. So if we have all that stuff internally from a staff level, how are we communicating it in a way that makes sense, whether it be a board member or members of the public, and then how are you drawing a conclusion between the data you see and maybe future improvements. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you one example, cleaning sewers. We have metrics for that. We have so many miles, or we have a program certified by the state that says you have to clean so many miles of your inventory per year. So that's a metric that we track on a monthly basis. It rolls up into the quarterly to make sure we're hitting our mark. That's more of a compliance benchmark, and the results of that data don't really tell you how to do a better job. It says it's kind of a yes or no, pass or fail. How are you doing compared to your benchmark? But we can certainly try to use data like that to say, is there a way we could do better? Or if our metrics are lower than a surrounding agency, go meet with that agency and say, how are you guys doing this? Do you have a better way to do it? Is there a better piece of equipment, better training, better whatever?
Well, yeah. Again, I don't think it's as finance as more public outreach, but I'll bring it up is that acronyms are great when you're in the industry, you know them all. If we're trying to show clarity and trying to show transparency, the viewing public, those few people that may watch us, and I know there are a few because I hear from two of them all the time,
Yeah.
you start using acronyms, they're gone. They're like, I wanted to watch it, but I don't understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sewer, I don't know if it's water, and I know we can't dumb it down dramatically, but
Yeah.
you know, sometimes to get away from acronyms, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we've tried to do a better job in the staff reports of always the first time you mention it to spell it out, and then right after the spell out, like supervisory data control and data
Right.
acquisition, and then SCADA, and every time after that we'll say SCADA, but then the person
Well,
can go
no, that
back.
makes sense.
But you know, sometimes it slips into our when we're presenting and speaking, it kind of just comes out, and so it's a good reminder. Remember who the audience is, and it could be just somebody at home that tuned us in for the first time.
Well, and at the last academy, I was watching the audience, and you could see when they tuned out and when they tuned in. You could see it when other people were talking, and you weren't talking, so you actually pay attention to
Yeah.
their mumbo jumbo, their body language. You could see where they didn't get a grasp on it, and they tuned out. Then they came back in when the subject changed to something else, and so I think that's a great place for us to learn. You know, where we should be, how we should be talking to people. 'Cause that's the prime example of our clientele. It's the only outreach that we do that is actually to our key ratepayer. You know, they're all ratepayers, and they all want to come and spend the day to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. And as I know you said, and other people have said over the years, we get everybody in here
Yeah.
over the course of 10 years to be fantastic. And the more worthwhile you make it, other than filling the forms out, the more they tell their neighbors, it was really great. I understood everything.
Right.
They showed me, you know, where the dirt comes from, where the water, you know, that's what people want to see on those things. They don't want to be talked over their heads.
Right.
You know, they want to come down to earth and tell us, what does it mean to me? Because everybody's there for the same reason. What's it mean to me? What's it mean to my purse, my pocketbook, my wallet? You know, it's how we all think.
Yeah.
So, you know, our personal lives, that's how we think. What's that mean to my wallet?
Right.
So, anyhow, enough of that. That's a different department. So for finance, I just like to make sure that we're seeing things, or can ask questions about things, because the less we have to ask at board meetings, or, you know, we don't, in my case, I don't like to take staff on at a board meeting. And a couple of times in the past, I've had to do it just because I knew I wasn't getting the full truth. And I know that's not the case now. So let me just say that's not the case now. But the more understanding we can have on a subject, the more we can support staff on a subject. I would like nothing better than a finance question come up, and Mr. Sinella knows the answer to it, he can answer the question. I think that's fantastic. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
that board has their stuff together. They know what's going on. When staff has to answer everything, it's like, well, the board doesn't know what day it is. You know, I mean, so for us to have that information ahead of time, at least to have the knowledge we can support, we can give a recommendation to the board as a finance committee. We've gone through this as we have in the past verbally, but we haven't actually said the board meeting. We've gone through this and we concur that this is correct.
Right.
Would make things a lot easier on the whole board. Because sometimes, and I know with all the committees, sometimes, you know, they don't do that, and you're going, well, let me ask some more questions,
Yeah.
because I don't know the answer.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. I agree that I think just from a preparation and a knowledge standpoint, from around things that are finance related, that's a good idea. I know when I was on the city planning commission, before any planning commission meeting, the commissioners would have a pre-meeting with the planning director. Now, obviously, we had to do it, and there were 7 of us, so we had to do it. Yeah,
Three.
there was multiple meetings, so we didn't have any Brown Act violations, but it's was common practice, and I don't know how it was on the city council if you guys met beforehand with either the planning director or the city manager, but.
Yeah, I'll just trying to just tell that part, is that yes, the entire council met with the city manager and staff on a one-on-one or two-on-one basis
Right.
to have
A brief.
a briefing, not a public meeting,
Yeah.
so you can let your hair down and say exactly the way you felt. So yeah, to answer you, yes, did the same thing.
Yeah. You know, and also in the planning commission, and I know it's a little bit different, projects and stuff like that, but like if there was gonna be a housing development, for example, it was very common, to meet with both staff, but also, the applicant and go walk the property and really get to know what was going on, so you could make an informed decision.
Right.
Here, you know, a lot of times it's just, you come into the meeting, you got the packet on Friday, the meeting's on Wednesday, you have the pictures and the verbiage, and really that's about it. And I know we can pick up the phone and call you all
Yeah.
anytime, I know that, but, I think having more of a formalized, process in place around the finance related things to be able to hash out differences or get questions that are, you know, that we need clarity around, it might not necessarily be a bad idea, so.
Yeah, and my years on the council was always, and even on the planning commission, and the first thing planning director Jerry Backloff told me when I first got there, is the best thing you can do is when you get your packet, go out and see every property, so you see it yourself, because you're gonna hear things at that meeting you're not gonna know the answer to. But if you've gone out and walked it, you know it. And I always did on planning and as well as city council, always went out to the property by myself or with somebody else and just asked questions, you know, and then came back and called staff and got questions or called the applicant beforehand. The more information we get, the better it is. Now, sometimes I feel like some people think that, well, they're just not trusting. No, it's just you gotta have those answers because we represent the people.
Right.
And you know, we do the same thing, I mean, basically, it's the same thing as the president has their pre-meeting, and I always thought that was kind of interesting. I think I know for a fact, when the 1 year that I served as president last year, I was more informed at those meetings because of those pre-meetings, and
Yeah.
had a much better understanding of what was coming before us, and why staff was making the recommendations they were making, or not making recommendations that they weren't making. And again, I don't know if we need to have kind of a pre-meeting for everything, but I think that, you know, again, if we're gonna have these committees, finance and policy and whatever other ones that we have in place, legal, that's a good forum to have kind of that pre-preparation before the meetings on a regular basis, so.
I'm going to ask for a clarification here. Are you talking about at the committee level having these pre-meetings, or are you talking for the board meetings having briefings?
Well, I think if we're having finance, let's use finance since we're in a finance committee meeting now. If these meetings are happening consistently, then it'll just happen naturally,
Right.
ahead of what's coming down the pike for the board meeting.
Right.
So I don't think we need to have an additional meeting, pre-meeting above and beyond this. I just think that one of the things that we should build these meetings around is anything that's finance related. There should be kind of a pre, that's coming before the whole board, should be some sort of pre-meeting with the finance committee. And if we're meeting, whatever that is, once a month, twice a month, whatever that consistency is, as long as we continue having those meetings to touch on those items, I think then that'll suffice. That'll meet what we're kind of talking about. So.
I think if you're gonna have pre-meetings on something other than finance, or something other than then it should be the whole board that goes in on
Yeah.
2-2-1s.
Right.
What'd you call them?
2-2-1 briefings.
2-2-1 briefings, yeah. But if it's finance, or if it's personnel, or if it's
Legal,
it just needs to-
policy.
the more information that we get, the better it is. And the place used to be run differently a year ago. And that's okay, it was a different GM, he had a different policy, and that's fine and dandy, I'm not, you know, saying anything about Caesar, but it's just, you know, it was ran differently, and I think people need to understand that we ask questions, it's to get answers, not to get you. Because we don't have that same feeling that we did a year or 2 or 3 ago, where we had the feeling that unless you asked something in public, you weren't gonna get an answer, and even then you had to wait to get an answer. They used to have we used to have one meeting a month, and we've talked about this. We used to have one meeting a month that was a board meeting, and another meeting that was what do they call it? Meeting of the whole. Called it a meeting of the whole. And when I got out here and I heard it, I went, "You can't do that. The meeting of the whole is." And I talked to Jeff about it several times, and Jeff assured me it was fine to do. And now Jeff assures me it's not fine to do. So it's like, well, you have to change your mind. So now we have 2 board meetings. But the good thing about the meeting of the whole was you could get things expressed, but that's supposed to be done in public. So that was the whole thing. Actually, one of the directors said, "Well, this is where we make the sausage, and then we present it at the board meetings." And I went, "That's exactly what you're not supposed to do. That's a clear Brown Act is there, so you don't.
Yeah.
You make the sausage in front of the people, so they can see how it's made. They get some idea. But you have to be educated on certain things before then." But so yeah, I don't agree with the meeting of the whole whatsoever. But 221s when necessary. There's going to be items coming up that you have split board decisions on that are obviously split, and you know it way ahead of time. That's something we need to give everyone a lot of information on, so when we do have the board meeting, they have enough information to look at both sides of an issue,
Yeah.
to get clarity. So I just, transparency is good for us to have, but it's also good for staff to have with us.
Yeah.
You know?
I think one of the hurdles we'll have here is trying to figure out for the finance committee in particular, what items do you want to see? So is there a threshold of fiscal impact that rises to the level of what the finance committee wanting to see it before it goes to the board? Almost everything we do has some level of fiscal impact.
Right.
Even though the staff report may say it's minimal. It's like, for example, we'll get developer money to come in to cover our costs, but we're expending time on a project, but we get reimbursed for that time. Well, that's an impact to our organization, but we never take things like that in front of the finance committee.
Right, yeah, no.
You know,
Those things are normal. That's normal day to day.
right.
When something's out of the ordinary, I think that's when it needs to show up. Or something you only do every few years, or something that's not.
Right.
This is mundane. It's kind of like looking at the agenda and seeing action items and consent.
Yeah.
Consent is you look at it and you say, well, this is easy peasy.
Yeah.
And a board member or a member of the public might have a question, but I don't think they can ask that question. But overall, it's pretty easy peasy. An action item requires open and a lot of information
Right.
to make a decision. So the same kind of thing, I think, and that's something we can certainly trust staff to decipher
Yeah.
what's different or of more importance than what's not. And again, I say this because we're the finance team, but who knows what we'll be in 2 months? We might not be on the finance anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
There
think
might
this
be
is-
2 other board members that are having the same conversation, so.
Right.
Yeah, so this just saves that conversation from happening in the future. 'Cause I think all the board, you get the feeling they all feel, they all love our staff and we all trust our staff. But you have questions, just have answers, because when you're out there in the general public and someone stops you while you're pumping gas and says, "Hey, how come you have an answer?"
Yeah.
You can't say, "Well, let me call staff and get back to you." Then you look like a moron. It's like, you don't know the answer to that? You approved it, we're paying for it, and you don't know the answer to that?
Yeah.
If it's highly technical, they don't expect it.
Right.
But if it's an overall, like let's say with finance, if it's highly technical, they don't expect it. But if it's an overall, how come our water went up,
Yeah.
then you should have.
That's one thing we can do. I mean, getting back to my data stuff, and sometimes it's just a matter of we're already collecting the information. Like one of the things that I look at every single board meeting on the consent calendar is the warrants list,
Right.
and it's it's interesting to see all the different outflow, the different categories of outflow of money going out, and I see stuff, and I used to ask these questions when I first got on the board, and I kind of got like, oh, it's nothing to see there type of answers, but 1 month SDG&E will be $50,000, and the next month it'll be like $19,000, and it'll be $50,000, and I'm sure it's all legit, and there's all good rhyme and reason, but I think if we presented the data, one of the things we can talk about as a finance committee for future meetings is there certain thresholds either based off of spend or based off of just things that are of interest to the board that we may want to take and pull out of the warrants list or other other areas and put into some sort of chart so we can
Sort
see,
of
are we
trending, yeah.
trending it up, are we trending down, is it just naturally just kind of goes up and down based off, you know, there's 28 days in one month and there's 31 days in another month, and maybe that's why there's these big swings, you know, whatever the answer might be, but we can kind of look at it.
Right.
Because I mean, when you're looking at just a list of checks that were written, and you're trying to, you know, compare it to, well, I thought that SDG&E bill was like half that last month, so, you know, something happened, well,
Yeah.
what was it, you know, and again, I'm sure there's a logical answer for it, but it's just, you know, it's kind of hard, and then, you know, it's not that we don't, I mean, neither one of us are shy to pull something off the warrant list, we've done it many times, it's just that, you know, after a while, you just start, you kind of, you stop asking questions if you're not getting the answers that make sense to you, so.
Well, that's
So that might be something we can look at.
And I agree with you guys from that perspective. For example, that's why I sent out the email about the OPEB payment. I said, this is going to be different than what you're used to seeing. It's out of the
Yeah.
ordinary, so I tried to highlight
Yeah.
it. And if I had caught things like, wow, this SDG&E bill is twice what it normally is, what happened,
Mhm.
Ed would probably say, oh, we had a lot of recycled water production. And,
Yeah.
you know, oh, okay, it may appear to be an anomaly, but it's explainable.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But yeah, but if we had it presented, like if we broke out, say we identified 10 things that are of interest for whatever reason to the board, and we're already collecting the data anyways, but we
Right.
put it more into some sort of trending chart that we can look at,
yeah.
and then maybe after a year, if we see that, oh, it always does that, and so that makes sense to us, and there's no anomalies, then maybe we
Yeah.
replace it or
Well,
get rid of it.
maybe what we could do is particularly on recurring payments. So, for
Mhm.
example, things like Aqua JPIA insurance. We
Mhm.
pay that every month. And I don't know if it's the same exact every month or if there's any
Well,
reason.
the health benefit we pay every month, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
And then the
Does our
insurance.
does
once
our
a year.
workers' comp ever fluctuate depending on how many injuries we have?
Not
or-
within a year.
It's
It-
kind of,
it's-
yeah, it's exactly
it-
smooth.
Yeah, they look back
Okay.
and they look back for a certain number of years, and then that affects your next year's premium.
it.
But during that next year, it'll all be a flat fee. But you could
But
say
legal-
over years.
Yeah, legal services could be another one. What are, you know,
Yeah.
so did we have an
Yeah.
expensive month for legal services for whatever reason? I mean,
So
those
we're-
types of things.
Yeah, we're not talking about the one-offs. There's a lot of things like I can't even think of an example right now, but that month.
Chemicals. You
Yeah.
have them one month, you don't give them next month, you give them another month.
Yeah, something like
No,
that.
it'd have to be like,
Right.
that's why I use the SDG&E, because I
Right.
assume we get a bill every month, like,
Yep.
just like we do at home, so, those are types of things that, and they have to be, you know, of significance, I mean, we're not, if we spend, you know, $500 a year on something, then,
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. I
You don't
mean,
want to
but-
know our boot allowances and how much money we're spending on boots every month. I get that that's a.
You know, I make mistakes in my everyday life, and in my working life, I've made mistakes, but I own up to them. So a lot of times, I am the type of person that looks for what went wrong, how to go wrong, and who was in charge of making it go wrong. Not because you're gonna do anything about it, because that's your purview, but
Yeah.
just, so I do look at assigning responsibility to people. And that doesn't mean they can't blow it, I blow it every day. But I'm just saying, so a lot of times my questions seem like I'm looking for, I'm not, I think you should be, but, because it doesn't, nothing I can do about it, but for instance, this OPEB, which it's always been explained to me, OPEB's always been explained to me, beyond our control, they send us and we underpaid, and you know what, I don't know that's beyond our control, that we didn't know. I don't know that, for instance. The reason why I used to ask, every meeting I asked at warrants, I pulled up 3 or 4 items on the warrant list. And in the beginning, when I first started doing it, and Tom was here, a lot of times they had to look at each other and then call Ed up or call James up. By the time I stopped doing that 2 or 3 years later, finance had the answers to every one of them. What I was looking for was, you write the checks, you better know what we're doing with it. That's your job, not mine.
Right.
And all I was doing was checking responsibility. Because ownership on who writes the checks, I think is the finance department. Ultimately, it's you, but I think it's the finance person, the guy and I still feel that way. There's a lot of times that every month I'd like to see us have the warrant list here at the finance and ask the questions I want to ask. Now, you have mentioned to me that I could always email you and ask the questions. But that takes a lot of time from your staff, from you, and from me. versus just asking it at a meeting. Maybe finance is the place. And it doesn't have to be the ones before they go to the board, it could be the ones after they go to the board.
Right.
It doesn't really matter, it could be like every month after we look at, because I look at that and I always have 5 or 10 questions as to, where's this money going, who is this company? A lot of them I've had answered over the years, but a lot of them I haven't. And it's just good to know, and it's good to know that finance knows.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know, Ed sent it to me, so I paid it. And I'm not saying that happened, but I'm just saying, Tom, Dick, and Harry.
But often it does happen that way. Ed will say, we paid this, we bought this widget for whatever, and we need to pay the bill. And then finance just says, okay, Ed said we need to pay the bill. So, but it's at Ed's level that a decision is being made that an expense has to be made. So.
Right. Well, yeah, but whoever signs the check, I've always been told the person that signs the check is who you owe allegiance to.
Yeah.
When you're working for somebody, who signed the check? GM signed it, well, he's the guy you owe allegiance to.
Yes.
Not anybody else. So.
And that's a tough one. I know just because I purchase things often. If I put in a purchase request or I request a PO or something for something, as long as there's not really nobody in finance who's writing the check asking the questions. It's budgeted for. I'm authorized to make the purchase. I purchase it. I don't actually write the check or pay the invoice when it comes in. I just approve the invoice for payment. So I don't know. I kind of.
Well, and that's okay. I mean, that's okay. Like I said, it used to be that Ed and James answered most of the questions, but then finance started knowing what they were.
Yeah.
That's for chemicals. That's for electric. Whatever it happens to be. And I was only asking for things. I stopped at $1,000. So I was only asking for things that were more than 1,000.
Right.
I didn't ask for nickel and dime. I didn't ask about boots. I didn't ask about it's just Friliac Company. Who are they? What were I check for $6,000 one for? Just out of curiosity.
Right.
I don't think anybody's buying cars or doing things like
No.
that. So so more transparent.
Well, let us take a look at the warrants list and maybe try to, at least behind the scenes, divide it into those that are more recurring costs that we can maybe draw conclusions from versus those one-off things that are like, okay, that month we happen to buy a ton of chemicals and we didn't the next month. Although chemicals, it may be, even though you may buy different amounts every month, you could look at it from a yearly basis and say what's happening in our chemical usage over time.
Sure.
Is it going up, is it going down, or is it just the price per ton that's going up or down?
Well, that's one thing I noticed that Ed does. When Ed comes up with a new system, I don't know if it's Ed or the staff
Yeah.
comes up with a new system of doing something, he shows you why he's doing it. He explains why he's doing it and what the savings is.
Yeah.
Like we just did something out of Twin Oaks, changed over chemicals or something, and explained why it was and what the results were. And I think that's the important thing for us to know is, what does that mean to the junkie public, which is us?
Right.
We're not staff.
Yeah, and some of those answers get pretty technical, like if you're going to go on-site generation of sodium hypochlorite instead of using liquid chlorine. Most people assume you started to check out as soon as they started to say that, but
It's cost savings.
yeah, we're trying to find a way to be more efficient and
Safety.
yeah,
And save money. Yeah,
Yeah.
the key with all of it, with finance, is how do we save money? Or how do we limit our exposure?
right.
Or how do we take in more money? Those are the two things we have to worry about.
Yeah.
Taking in money and spending money. And it's a lot easier for us to look at spending money than it is taking in money, because taking in money is the hardest thing to do.
Yes, it is.
Raising any type of thing is always difficult to do. But when warranted, it happens.
We're probably overdue. Talking about taking in money, one source of revenue for us is the interest that we earn in our investments and savings. That I know we get there's a report, kind of a dashboard that's presented in the packets, but
Right.
we used to. John used to actually come up and present it during the board meeting. I don't think we need to have that at every single board meeting, but it's
Quarterly.
maybe it's time to have an update on that, at least for the finance committee. And I'd also be kind of curious, and I recognize that we're a public agency and we are very limited to what we can and cannot invest in, and we want to be ultra conservative with those investments. But we've seen over the last 18 months, the market go from 17,000 to 23,000 the Dow. I'd just be kind of curious to see what our gains have been compared to. I mean, I know it's not going to be compared to the typical 401k out there that's a 70-30 split on stocks and bonds, but that'd be kind of just maybe like a little overview or an update of what are our options, how are we doing, and that kind of stuff. And maybe it's just take the report that we already have. I'll be honest, I've read it a few times since I've been on the board, but I don't read it before every single meeting or the one time a month when it comes out. Just it's kind of a repeat of the same information every single month with some minor changes. So maybe it's time for an update on that, and a little bit more of a intimate update than just the.
Yeah, and we could do that. I mean, you could probably just
Present the quarterly like we did, just talk about it rather than just present it in the report package.
or maybe at least start here, maybe the next
Yeah.
finance committee.
And maybe dig a little bit deeper into like explaining exactly what we can and cannot do, and what we can invest in, and what the investment goals are. Do we have a target that we're trying to hit? Is that 0.5%? Is that 1%? Again, I have no idea. I'm just throwing numbers up, but whatever that target is, are we hitting it? Are we exceeding it? Those types of conversations. Is there any? How does that compare with what other agencies like us are? Are they doing the exact same thing because we're so limited, or did they find a way to be both conservative but also squeeze out an extra 0.5%? I don't know. But
I'd like to have a meeting in the future, hopefully near future, OPEB, explain exactly in finance, explain exactly our OPEB obligations, and explain also how we're so far behind on OPEB. And I know I'm gonna hear all the agencies are behind, and well, all the agencies knows it's gonna go up. I mean, so if we all know it's gonna go up, how come we're all behind?
Just want to make sure you're not mixing PERS with OPEB. It sounds like you're talking actually about PERS.
But both,
Okay.
OPEB and PERS.
And maybe that's good to talk about them at the same time.
Yeah,
Probably, I was
So you
going
can make
to.
those distinctions.
That's one of the things I definitely want
Thank
to
you.
bring in front of the finance committee in the near future is PERS. We know a lot more now where costs are going, so I think it's time to start with the committee, then eventually to the full board as to what we see coming.
and I would like to know more about our OPEB obligations, because I just, I don't know. I have to have the presentation to explain how I feel about some of the things on there that I like. And I know we cut most of that stuff out, but just want to know how many we still have hanging in there. I mean, things like that, it's
Yeah.
like workman's comp. I mean, I saw something on workman's comp a year or two ago I asked for, and they sent me, and they're like, one of our guys that collected $100,000. And my question is, what happened? I guess, did he break a pinky finger?
Yeah.
I don't know the answers to that. But, so those are things I'd like to know more about.
Okay.
But the OPEB and PERS are both something I like to know
Yeah, I
about.
think you're right. They should be at the same meeting because there's a lot of
Yeah,
commonality.
sometimes confused that
Yeah.
you're going back and forth between the two.
Well, yeah, and I didn't
Treated so
understand,
much alike.
and you brought up to me, it made me very curious as to when you add, let's say you add a person to your crew, PERS has to be informed that you're adding someone to the crew?
Yeah, they need to know who
An employee.
you have.
Yeah.
If it's an employee, they need to know how many employees you have, what their pay range is, what their pay scale is.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's say you wanted to add another, I don't know, another engineer. You're adding another engineer in the engineering department.
Yeah.
You have to get that approved by them ahead of
No,
time?
no, you just have to enroll them.
You have to. It's
That's what's called-
you're
they're called
informing
enrollment.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
So like recently, we had to ask the board to actually create a new job title. We're switching for the SCADA needs. We're going from a equipment and instrumentation tech to a control systems tech.
Right.
So that got added to our list, and then we forwarded that to PERS and say we now have a new title, and when we hire the person, we'll say, and we have a person filling that space. So PERS just needs to know, because they're trying to figure out how much money they need to have put aside to pay the retirement obligations for all these folks.
I understand. I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, all of us are more comfortable and more understanding of Social Security. PERS is the same as Social Security, basically, but where do they get this sudden power? Social Security, you don't have to tell them what their title is or what, you just send them how much money you're paying in payroll, and they tell you what percentage to send them.
Yeah.
What's the difference with PERS? I don't get how they reach into your job. I
Well, we have an
guess.
agreement
Well,
with them.
I can address that. With the Social Security Administration, they actually have more reporting through the SSA, your W-2. We have to file our W-2s with the SSA. So you can almost look at that as analogous to what we have to do with PERS. So PERS doesn't get that SSA stuff, so we have to enroll people in PERS. It's almost like the same thing. W-2s are a big reporting thing for Social Security.
Right, but in PERS, you have to report to them their classification, you have to report to them, you don't report that to Social Security when you hire
No,
somebody.
no, yeah, they don't care about that stuff.
No.
And even PERS doesn't, I mean, they want that form, but what they do with it, in the end, they just care about what your compensation is, and
Yeah.
how often are you paid, and are you enrolled in, multiple employers and stuff
Right,
like that.
so, yeah, okay, because PERS, again, just, whatever your monthly or weekly, whatever happens to be your salary is, they take a percentage of it.
Yep.
End of story. Doesn't matter what your title is.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter
Yeah,
that we're informing them and not informing them, they just
No,
know what you.
they're collecting
Just the formality.
stuff like titles and stuff. They're collecting it for some reason, but
Yeah.
Right, but
if
it's not to our benefit.
no, but I mean, it's not to our
Doesn't matter.
detriment
Nah.
probably either.
Yeah, and we enter into an agreement with PERS, and when you're a member agency, they're basically signing an agreement, and one of their stipulations is you have to provide us this on I don't know if it says annually or just whenever you make changes.
yeah, whenever we make,
I just thought it sounded more difficult when I heard about it than
no, it's
what
just
life
a
is. It's like,
formality.
Everybody's collecting. I mean, the whole I-9 process with what you have to report to to the government as it pertains to people, believe it or not, people's race and everything else. I mean, it's just they're just tracking data. What they're doing with it, who knows?
Yeah.
okay. So what words of wisdom does staff have for us?
Well, we have some thoughts. Tom and I have talked about ideas that we will be bringing forward to the Finance Committee in the near future, but before we just started scheduling them, we wanted to see if there was any hot pressing items that the two of you had, and we could fit those in with the other items, making sure we don't put too much on an agenda, like that one meeting was a lot.
It's just over.
Yeah,
I mean,
information overload.
I don't even remember what we were talking about. So
I
it's
understood
like-
it all.
Yeah, don't know what his problem is. Yeah.
So yeah, I know we're kind of getting close to our time.
Okay, well, it's-
But what do you got? Did you have a couple things you wanted
well,
to
this
share?
is just stuff we're working internally, so it's not ready for
We
prime
already
time.
did the first one with the investments.
Yeah.
Okay,
That was
good.
one we were
Yeah,
thinking of bringing.
we talked
up.
about investments, energy analysis, PERS updates, D-Cell. We have questions coming up with D-Cell, applying for local resource program funds, reserve policy, debt planning. These are the types of
Yeah.
things on
That we
here.
can spread out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
think
not
those are all
hit them
good.
all at once.
The other thing too, I don't know if it's finance or if it's personnel or if it's a whole separate committee either altogether, but we're 1 year into our 3-year MOU. So in sometime in the next 12 months, those conversations are going to start striking up again, right,
Yeah.
for the
Right.
third year. So again, I don't know if that's what committee that falls into, but that's probably something that I know the board's going to all want to participate in at some point, but could have those conversations at a committee level to kind of get that ball rolling too here in the coming months.
Yeah, I think the current agreement expires June 30th of 19.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So we have time, but yeah, so worlds intersect at some point in time. We can bring information to you regarding PERS obligations, for example, and what's coming, without talking about who's going to pick up those costs as a district or employees. And then that's when you start getting into negotiations. You want to be careful you're not mixing those two too soon. But I think it's okay to get the information out there to say, hey, here's what PERS is telling us is coming, what our obligation is going to be.
Yeah, and the last thing, and then I'll be done. But is, and I know it's too early right now, but sometime in the next 6 months, Glenn, if you can prepare for us some sort of analysis and your opinion on how things are going with the outsourced position that we outsourced recently. I think it was an IT.
Yeah.
And just kind of give us, an update. How's it working out? Is it
Yeah,
good?
so
Is
there
it
was
bad?
a-
Is it
the night we brought that forward, one of the directors, I think it was Director Hernandez, asked for a 3-month check-in. And what I
Okay.
told him is, well, at the end of 3 months, staff will meet and start to evaluate. It'll probably take an extra month to get it back in front of the board. So probably in about 4 months, we'll give you kind of a peek as to how we think it's doing.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
Director Martin?
Yeah, only last thing I think of, we've talked about it before. Strictly not finance, it is, but it isn't. Because we're all interested in our assets and the assets we have in regarding property. And I know we have and I don't know, we ever had a full conversation about it. We have the 14 acres up in Twin Oaks that we took off the market because we didn't want to sell it for what that guy was offering
Yeah.
at the time. So we said, just forget
That was
it.
the Grove?
The
Yeah.
Grove.
Right.
We've talked about the hill back here, and that's ongoing. It seems to me that it takes 5 years to get the smallest things done. I understand we're a public organization, but we also have property in the hills we haven't even discussed anywhere that I know of yet, up on the hill, and it's like, well, why haven't we discussed that? Wasn't there a time we were going to discuss all the property?
It was gonna be part of the strategic plan. Well, I was gonna raise it as part of the strategic plan to see if the board as a whole wanted to pursue monetization of our real estate assets. I know there's certain board members that have expressed an interest in it, and if the direction of the board is, yeah, let's go prepare a strategic plan on real estate, we can do that. That was gonna be part of the strategic plan to kind of get derailed when,
Yeah.
but we're gonna try to put it back on the rails.
Yeah, I think it's
We
worth
haven't
looking
had,
at.
we haven't had the strategic plan in quite some time, and that was, a lot of that was due to the change.
Yeah,
And so you've had your plate overfull for the last year and doing a wonderful job at it, in my opinion. But I understand that, but the strategic plan, the 5-year plan, we took the snapshot 2 years ago. That snapshot has to be retaken now. You can't start doing that with 2-year-old information. I wouldn't think.
yeah.
So we need to come up with a new date to do that snapshot, because that one's gone. So there's a lot of things we're behind on. I guess it does have something to do with finance. So, but I guess for the whole board as well, in that case, sorry. A little off the subject there.
Cool. That was a very valuable conversation.
All right.
Yeah, good to have.
A lot to think about. So we'll try to get back into more of a regular, hopefully monthly, and we'll put a few recommended items on there. And then if you guys have something that is of interest that you want to add on to it, just let me know.
Instead of scrambling for a date every month, maybe we can come up with a set
A
date.
standing,
Yeah, just a
Outstanding.
standing
Yeah.
one.
And if one of us, or in any committee, if one of us can't make it, you can't make it. You try to
Yeah.
move it around, but if you
Yeah.
can't, you can't. You
okay,
still have to have a meeting. So,
Yeah.
Just to know by the weight of the items on there, is investments, OPEB and PERS, is that too heavy for one? Do you wanna see that stretched out over two?
I have a lot of questions about OPEB and PERS.
Do you wanna stretch it over
I
two?
think
Oh, that
OPEB
could
and
be
PERS
one.
is probably its
That could be
own
one
thing.
meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
And investments, you could probably add with something else. For me, for you, investments are more, for me, I understand there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, yeah. So that one you can add that to the agenda with something else because
okay.
I think it would be nice to see, get a refresher on just what we can do, but also just kind of see what we have been doing and where does that line up with our targets if we have targets. I'm
Okay.
sure you guys do. Like you're trying to meet some kind of goal, right?
yeah,
So and then that hopefully will lead us into a conversation of if there anything that we can do to be innovative to try to get the most bang for our buck, and then you have to always of course evaluate that versus the risk. Is it worth the risk to do that?
right.
So so we that just will help us kind of generate that conversation. So
And agreeing with that, I'm a firm believer in local. Do as much local as you can. So my question of finance is, whatever you're allowed to do with the county, for instance, the county pool of money,
Yeah.
are we doing the maximum? And if not, is there a reason that we're not doing the maximum? Or could we do the maximum and take something away from
Yeah.
You know, Phoenix. You know, I guess it is keep the money as much locally as you can, if it makes sense to you. You're the finance guru, you're supposed to know that,
Yeah.
so, but you can tell us why you don't or why you do.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes those are tough because you may want to do it local, but out of the area investment may give a better return. So
I agree.
how much?
And that would be a reason to go out of the area.
And,
I
you know,
mean,
you
all
wanna-
other things
you wanna
being equal.
diversify and
Yeah.
all that
Yeah,
stuff,
all things
so.
being equal, yeah. That's kind of a policy that the city looked at, and maybe we should look at too, in finance, was that when it comes to buying anything, no matter what it was, the city of San Marcos first. In our case, we have to fudge a little bit of Vista, a little bit of Carlsbad.
Yeah.
but the city first, and it was up to, I think the city uses 5%. If it's within 5% of the best rate, it's easier to buy locally. Rather than have, especially in our case, rather than have our trucks driving all over San Diego County with the gas mileage, the time, and all
Yeah.
that would come out the same if you could get it at Lowe's next door or
Right.
Jimmy's. So I don't know if we have that policy, or if we follow anything like that now,
We
but I
do.
think that'd be an important thing to do. Paper products, all the stuff.
We have a
you buy.
local preference.
We have a
but
preference, but we don't specify
Yeah,
like a 5%
right.
thing, we just say buy local when practical.
Right, but, and I would say the problem that the city found they had with preferences,
Yeah.
is some of those preferences have been, my buddy owns a tire repair shop, and he's
Yeah.
gonna charge, that kind of stuff is what I'm concerned about.
No, yeah, you
Is
still
that
have
our
to compete,
preference is, well, this guy makes a valve, but he's in Spring Valley, but he's a friend of mine, so we're getting our valves from Spring Valley. Those kind of things, that I know our staff wouldn't do that,
Yeah.
but the odd person in the world might. So it's just things like that that makes you really think about local and building a local economy, because we collect all our money locally, we should try to spend it locally if we can. And you probably already done it,
All
He
right.
gets everything from China.
but. Yeah.
The whole world
Don't
does.
we all?
Oh, no, that's the Hop Sing theory of water revolution.
Yeah.
Just about everybody's Halloween costume today, they're all fabricated in China.
Yeah.
Except Tommy made his.
Well, I still have to buy the jacket.
That's
if
true.
they had it.
Yeah, you can get
Really?
And the jacket was originally made in China.
China, probably.
Yeah.
And you had the costume hanging in your closet?
No, it was
He repurposed it.
Put together, okay.
It was very clever because he took an old, longer leather jacket and turned it inside out, and the lining happened to be very decorative, so it didn't look, it
Kind
wasn't
of
a
match the
leather jacket.
character. Yeah.
It matched
Oh.
the character, so.
Dude, just to clarify, so the next meeting, do you want to see OPEB and PERS? It sounds like you can.
Unless you
kinda-
have something more important that's coming up on our docket.
That's a
pretty
good way to put it, because
Yeah.
we may with the investments, because we're considering potentially outsourcing investments, and since the economy is doing a little bit better, now that margin that we can get from an actively managed portfolio might make a little more sense.
Yeah.
So that's one
Talk
thing we
about
are
it.
kicking around, so it may just as a need come before that, but if we're not ready for you, we'll just
I think
bring
just
OPEB
for
and
that,
PERS.
that would be a good approach going forward, is if it's
To
a
have a
need, if
couple
it's a
things lined
need,
up.
or if it's coming up
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
docket,
It was the top of the list.
that, yeah, automatically jumps
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay.
You prioritize it, and
Yeah.
so we're having it
Yeah.
in time.
Is there a particular date and time if you wanted to have a standing meeting for the committee? Like a first Monday and at 4 o'clock, something like that, or?
We've been having it at the end of the months, but there's no set date for me, I know. Our least used days are usually anything else that we're doing, is we don't do things on Mondays.
Yeah, typically a Thursday. I mean, if you do like a
Thursday's good for you?
one of the Thursdays, they usually are. I mean, there's, every day is just going to be an occasional conflict. It just
Yeah.
is what it is.
Right.
So.
Well, and yeah, whatever we set up, it'll be with the understanding that it may change because of things, and then we'll have to make sure we notice it. And
Right,
Right.
but yeah, this way it's more constant, if we're gonna have one.
Maybe like the third Thursday, or but then again, isn't there like when is the CSDA meetings? Is that the second Thursday every quarter?
I can't remember which Thursday
It's
it
the
is.
Third
Thursday.
Thursday?
Thursday, I think.
Yeah. So well, let's. Can we get back to you on that?
Yeah.
We'll all
That's
be here
fine.
tomorrow for the board meeting, so
Yep.
let me think about it and then.
Yeah, we just have to remember to bring it up before we leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, the fourth Thursday.
Yeah, there you go.
Thursday works for me.
Thursday, Thursdays are,
4 o'clock, I'm assuming.
Thursdays
Yeah.
are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's the same for the fourth Thursday then.
Fourth Thursday?
Tentatively the fourth Thursday.
Right, at 4. Before we close, Mr. Hunsaker, any questions, anything to add?
Your comments on the board, I think, were appropriate and accurate. I think the board should have been twice as big and half as much coverage. Where every dollar goes, I got the idea, but it seems like you should have been using quarters, dimes, and nickels there because it's rather confusing to really get a feeling for the money of how the dollar breaks out. Especially
Oh,
when you
to
have the
understand
dimes
is
and the
that they
nickels
quote.
and the quarters all the same color. And if you actually put the image of a penny or a dime or a
Yeah.
nickel, that helps quite a bit.
That was a
The
cost
desal
restriction.
water, well, that supposedly is mostly a 1-year bump. That'd be an issue. So that would raise more issues than it would answer. And as far as the infrastructure, I like to see a better division between infrastructure that's being expanded versus infrastructure that just needs to be upgraded or repaired or replaced. There should be a very clear demarcation. As far as pensions go, the best meeting I saw was at the San Marcos City Council. And they had a very good expert there, and it went on, I think, about an hour and a half, if I remember correctly. And
Was it somebody
that
from-
is a very complicated arrangement. And there are some things like purchasing power floors. That's a big issue that you never hear, but except I heard it at that city council meeting. You may remember the guy.
Yes.
And that's a big factor. And the pension benefits, the medical for the retirees who get it before they go on to Medicare. I like to see that cost broken out a little clearer. So that's all I have.
Do you remember if the speaker that was at the city was somebody from PERS? Or was it?
No, he was a consultant.
Okay.
He was an outside consultant, I don't remember his name.
And I don't remember his name either, but I was very
But
impressed.
he had a great way of explaining it so that everyone understood it. It wasn't.
But you can count on about 2 sessions if you really want to cover the current situation,
Yeah.
which is a lot more complex, and not understanding the influence of inflation is another big thing that gets into it, because that's where the purchasing power is going to kill you, and all these
Yeah.
minimum wage increases and all these other taxes go up and the inflation goes through the roof.
And your purchasing power goes.
Yeah, and then there's a floor for the pensions, and after a while, they get 100% of every increase going in for purchasing power. This is, I guess 2020 is where I see the most concern about really having a financial collapse.
So, thank you, Mr. Hunsaker. So, I guess if you bring it to us, and if we think it warrants the full board, maybe we'll look at bringing someone in for the full board
Okay.
to look at it.
Yeah, in the meantime, we'll try to find out who the speaker was.
Yeah, he was very good too. He was very good. Because we had Roki as our finance guy for like 30 years, and Roki was awesome. But when it came to explaining things, he wasn't.
Yeah.
This guy was like, okay, I explain it to high school kids all the time, so you should catch it,
Yeah.
and we did. We're like,
All right.
Thank you very much. This meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
Good meeting, guys. Thank you.
Do you know